Welcome to the show. I'm Danella, and here's what's happening now. This week, the Black Panther surpasses Titanic in movie sales. That's huge. Also this week, hey, political pop, this is what we're talking about. Paul Ryan's exit and Chuck Schumer's drop mic moment. I'll explain in just a moment. And our world is on deck, and we're going to talk about our planet. Climate change affecting our world. This week was a big week. We'll talk about some of the things that are happening in different parts of the world and how we cannot continue to ignore this. But first, let's get into some interesting news. So remember back in the day, maybe when you were in school, you wanted to get out of, not turning in your homework. You may have contemplated saying this: the dog ate my homework. Well, in Argentina, there's a little bit different there. A couple of police, they said something like this: the mice ate the weed that was in custody. But it's no longer in custody because, the mice ate the weed. So a judge is not buying it. Hear this: 8 police officers have been dismissed for blaming, the mice for eating the weed. How much weed are we talking about? Okay, over 1,000 pounds. Okay, first, this leads to a lot of questions. Okay, how many mice are we talking to eat 1,000 pounds of weed? Yeah, this is crazy. So anyway, the city's former police commissioner said, this is in fact what happened. The mice ate all of these drugs. So forensic experts doubted this, of course, because they're thinking wouldn't the mice be dead? So none of the mice were dead. And then also they said mice do not see marijuana as food. So this is under investigation. It's funny to me that it's really actually under investigation. You're missing over 1,000 pounds of weed. You're missing that. And somehow you're going to say that the mice ate it. So anyway, the police officers will now have to testify in front of a judge on May 4th. I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting story. Anyway, it's real, and that's what really happened. Let's get into political pop. Here is your political pop for Friday, April 13th. What? Is Friday the 13th and I'm just realizing that? What? Okay, so political pop this week. Paul Ryan announced that after his term in January, he is out. He's stepping down. He wants to spend more time with his family. He says he doesn't want to be a weekend dad. I don't blame him. Sounds terrible. But here's what Chuck Schumer said. I thought this was pretty great. So before I let you know what he said, remember this week was also huge because Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen, his home was raided by the FBI, his office was raided by the FBI, and his hotel room. That's when the raids are serious. They gonna find you. So anyway, Senator Chuck Schumer reminded Trump of this.
I'd remind the president that the source of the referral, Special Counsel Mueller, is a lifelong Republican. The Deputy Attorney General who signed off on the referral, Rod Rosenstein, is a Republican, appointed by President Trump. The Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, a Republican, appointed by President Trump. And the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District in New York, which sought a search warrant based on that information, is a Republican, appointed by President Trump. The agents in New York who carried out the seizure are under direction of Christopher Wray, a Republican, appointed by President Trump. So if President Trump believes this to be a partisan conspiracy, he once again ignores the fact that every major player is a Republican, and all but the judges appointed by President Trump himself.
Drops mic. So much for Democratic conspiracy. And that was your political pop. And now it's time for In Our World. We'll get into it right now. Climate change affecting our world on the land, on the sea, in our daily life. We're going to talk about a couple things that happened this week that we need to know because, as I say, we all need to do our best to limit our waste, our own personal waste, as well as make a change in our world. So we have to talk about this. So first we'll talk about the Gulf Stream. They say that because of global warming, it's causing the Gulf Stream to be its weakest. And we're talking weakest in over 1,600 years. That's major. And they're saying that this weakening won't slow down anytime soon. And here's how it will affect us. It will help increase the rise in sea levels as well as increase the frequency of extreme weather events. This is because this system brings warm, salty water from the Gulf of Mexico up to the North Atlantic, where it releases the heat into the atmosphere before going back down to the ocean, then traveling south to Antarctica, and then that journey starts all over again. So when you have global warming, more heat into the ocean, thus throwing off our normal cycle of things. And we've all seen this happening. We see more floods happening. In DC, one moment we're having snow flurries, literal snow in spring, and then a couple days later, 70-degree weather. A friend of mine put on Instagram that spring is on perks. Now, I'm not really familiar with what perks make you do, but yes, climate change, that's what that is. Southern California, for example, you'll see them go through extreme drought and then floods. So here's what else happened this week. The results came out this week of a sperm whale that washed up on the beach in Spain. Dead on the beach. They found out this week that this sperm whale had 64 pounds of plastic in its stomach. Can you imagine 64 pounds? Plastic exposing our marine life to toxic chemicals that they ingest. It affects our marine life and then also can end up on our table and affect us as well. And then the green-haired turtle this week added to the endangered list. Now, the green-haired turtle is an interesting kind of guy. His hair looks, what's it look like? Punk rock. It kind of reminds me of a little gremlin. Little actual green hair. And breathes through its genitals. That's rare. I didn't even know the green-haired turtle existed. Now it's endangered. So I talk about these things to say that in this mass consumption that we all live in, and I've talked about this on the show before, the idea of trying to reduce my personal waste and the waste of our family. And it's hard because you do things like you buy water bottles. And as much as you think I'm going to recycle them, if you ever venture out, I'm sure if you venture in the U.S. as well and go to the beach, how many plastic bottles do you see? Tons of them, right? Bottled water bottles. Then when you go outside of the U.S. as well, go to various beaches, what do you see? Plastic water bottles. And so as much as you'd like to recycle them, are they really getting recycled? And so it gets hard because, if you're like me, you like convenience. We're used to this convenience. I remember in the 80s where we would throw trash on the ground. Like you'd go to the park and it's like, oh, just throw the trash out the window. It's terrible. That's what we used to do. But now we know that, the trash doesn't magically disappear. We have to actually throw it in the trash or recycle it. And so I bring these issues up, especially when we have a government who's investing less in renewable energy, who's investing more in fossil fuel, who is denying that climate change exists. It is important now than ever that we continue to just be aware of ourselves and take personal responsibility when we can to just leave the least amount of trash and do the least amount of harm possible while we're here. And when I say least amount of harm, I mean, to the actual planet, to the animals, and specifically to each other. So it's little things like using a reusable water bottle or using glass instead of plastic, period. Little things this summer coming up, barbecuing, throw your trash in the trash, recycle the plastic and aluminum. I swear if we each do our small part, it can make a difference in our world. Before we wrap up the show, I want to share with you some girl talk that I had with a girlfriend of mine. And the reason I want to share this is because sometimes I find that things that are private in life, you keep it to yourself, but then you might talk to somebody else and you realize, wait, that's happened to you as well? Wait, this is what people do? So yeah, we're going to talk about that. And men, some of you may be guilty of this. So my friend is telling me this story about a guy that's her friend, and he comes over to the house and, they're hanging out, and she turns around, does something. When she turns back around, he lets it all hang out. And you know what I'm saying? That's hanging out of his pants. And so she's like, you gonna zip that up? And the reason it's not funny. It's not funny. But to me, it's funny. And why I think it's funny is that I'm literally like, in what world does this work? Because I've been in a similar situation with a friend. This friend said, oh, do you mind if I run up and use your restroom? I said, sure, come on up and use the restroom. He comes out. That's not, pants are down, ankles, drawers are down. I'm just like, yeah. Is everything okay? Like, what is going on? And so the question I have, one, is what woman does this work with? Clearly, there has to be some woman that this works with, because I have another girlfriend who has said the same thing. Chilling, turn around. Wait, are you hot? Are you hot? I mean, I could turn the air up some. I know it's winter, but maybe you're hot. So what I want to share is, first of all, guys, can you tell me what type of woman does that work with? Because in my mind, I'm seeing a woman say, oh my gosh, it's so lovely. Let me praise it and honor it. Like, is that what you think is going to happen? Has that happened? Who are these girls? Who are these girls? Because what I'd like to do is then share it with the other girls that aren't those kind of girls, so they can redirect the fellas to those type of girls and say, oh, so sorry. I'm not that type of girl, but let me introduce you to a girl that is that type of girl. It's kind of comical where they do that at. I mean, and maybe as a woman, we just don't have to do as much, because I guess technically, so now that I'm really thinking about it, and I'm starting to wonder if a woman takes off of her clothes in a meeting per se, like let's say the guy's like, oh, I'm just going to turn around and get you a glass of water because you're thirsty. And then he turns around and she's naked. Is it because, yes, it's more likely that he'll just, it's no questions asked, let's just do this? Because maybe that's where the thought is coming from, that this is remotely like sexy when things were just regular. Because the other thing for women is we're more mental than visual. And I know guys are more visual, but girls, we tend to be more mental. And so if we're just, running errands, sweeping up, and then you just turn around and this is your friend, somebody who you think of as like a brother, or, a neighbor, you're just not thinking that you want to be with this person. You might need a little rousing up, something. So I just have to throw it out there, because these are things that I have known women, we talk about this. We don't really talk about it in a public setting. And I want to pose the question, because why not? Guys, what woman does this work for? That's what I want to know. Who is she? Who's accepting this? Women, do you accept this? Am I tripping? Are my friends tripping? Where we're kind of like, what is this? Why? Because we're laughing about it. Or are women accepting it, pretending to laugh about it? Yeah, so many questions. But as always, you can email me, Danella@DanellaNOW.com. And if you're brave, leave a comment. It's all good. Or you can DM me on social media @DanellaNOW. So, as we wrap up the show, I have some good news and some bad news. Great news. Those of you that have been affected by Mercury retrograde, I know I have. It has been an annoying period. It hasn't been terribly annoying, but I've definitely had some technical problems trying to edit up some footage that I had to get out. That took for freaking ever. Also, communication problems. It's been crazy. I'm looking forward to it ending. So, the good news, Mercury goes direct on Sunday, April 15th. Great. The bad news is that everything else that goes wrong in your life is now back to being your own fault. Totally. You can no longer say, oh, Mercury's in retrograde. Such a crazy time. It's true. And I know a lot of exes have been popping up. I have a lot of friends that have been talking to their exes. That's another thing that happens with Mercury retrograde. So if you've had an ex pop back up, you can blame it on retrograde up until the 15th. Now, after the 15th, you cohorting, kicking it, canoodling, whatever you're doing with your ex, it's now your own fault. Can't blame it on Mercury retrograde. You've been warned. As always, thank you so much for joining the show. I hope you have an incredible weekend, and I'll see you next week.